Greetings, friends! Welcome back to the Film Alchemist podcast, the show where we look at movies we love, break them apart, to find out what gives them their magic. I'm your host, Josh Griffey. Oh, you're doing that now? Okay. I was about to give you a highly illusionist intro, but that's joined by my friend, cult leader, rotting corpse, rocker of the face binder, and co-host,
Alex Dandino. Sorry, we say magic, and I'm so excited because this is we're actually talking about magic.
Oh, I see what you did there. There you go. Yeah, see, I was in my spiel. I was locked in. No, what I like about this too, I guess you're not an illusionist. If I said you're next, you're walking betwixt the worlds, right?
Oh no, you're just doing magic.
All right, so this month, well, first off, if you love the show, please leave us a rating and review, especially on Apple Podcasts. That means the world to us. We've seen you guys doing it. It does help. Trust us.
Really appreciate it, guys. It's very
Get
nice.
at us on social media. Let us know movies you would like to see us cover, themes for a whole month, double feature, people to have on the show, anything. Let us know, and we'll be there for you. And then what else? We got the YouTube. That's Nerd Alchemist, plural, with an S at the end. So you can see our faces and hear our sultry tones. All right, so this month, the pod takes the case. I would argue that Alex loopholed my ass, because I picked the two best detective movies ever, The Golden Child and Lord of Illusions. And Alex picked movies that are mysteries indeed, but no detectives? Am I mistaken? You picked Zodiac and Brick. Zodiac's a newspaper.
Just because they are not detectives in title does not make them detectives. You're missing the point of the genre itself.
See, me and Amy had an argument about that, and I was like, everyone is detecting all the time. My dad thought he was a detective when I would come home and lie to him, and he'd put on like the little, the game is afoot, and I'd be like, all right, that's cool. But okay, so you chose Zodiac and Brick as your two choices.
I chose Zodiac and Brick because they are my favorite. They do a great job of using the film noir genre to its, because that's really where the detective stories live, is this noir area. So that's where I like the ones that kind of subvert the genre a little bit, and that's definitely Brick and definitely Zodiac.
Yeah, well, we're going to start today with probably the best of the four. Of course, I chose that. Clive Barker's Lord of Illusions, right? Now, this movie I have loved for ages, right? So, as people who listen to the show know, I rank Hellraiser among not only my favorite horror movies, but one of my favorite movies of all time. So when I saw that, I think the first time I saw Hellraiser, I was maybe 13 years old, right? And it's kind of this like, I'm starting to form who I am, and you're starting to like experience your sexuality, and all of a sudden you see this Hellraiser thing, you're like, I don't know what this is, it all feels wrong and dangerous, and I like E a lot, right? So then that sent me on this rabbit hole, right? And you discover that Clive Barker, is this vastly accomplished author, and that he wrote all these other. So then you're finding all these other Clive Barker movies, even Clive Barker adjacents, right? This is one of the few that Clive Barker actually got behind the chair, right? So he wrote it for the screen, and he actually got out and directed it. And what I would argue is that you get this. It's essentially just the way more entertaining version of Chinatown. If the water that they're stealing is a vast pool of magic, that the reservoir being stolen is magical. All right, Alex, walk me through. Is this the top 10 for you all time now?
No, but it was still very entertaining. I don't think people realize, and this is something like, I think horror fans know this, but people who watch movies in general need to understand like how important Clive Barker is to pop culture in general.
Right.
Like, there are things that he has done that no one remembers that he has done simply because he either is too cool to admit it or like doesn't care enough because he's too focused on the next batshit crazy thing he's doing. But like, of course, though, Clive Barker takes his stab at film noir. It's very, it makes a lot of sense. It's very on brand, and he does a really good job with it too. It's fun. I really like it. And again, like, I think the phrase "occult detective" is one of my all-time favorite, like, little misnomers for weird things and like something you need in a movie. Like, well, I don't know, it's just a guy and he's got a tattoo.
Yeah,
occult detective.
No,
Perfect.
but Harry is actually marked in this film, right?
Oh yeah, no.
What I like about this
marked.
movie is this was essentially the test run for Constantine, right? This movie,
Oh yeah,
might be the best Constantine movie we've ever seen. You know what I love that about it because I like the occult detective, right? Because I don't just think it's a guy who like, oh yes, I've dabbled, right? Like, oh yes, after I go on a hardy case of like insurance frauds, right? I go down to Bar Sinister and get spanked and ponder the darkness. What I like about this though is it takes that kind of like broken. What if Humphrey Bogart wasn't just broken because,
right. Well, and
right, but that he had seen something that made him question. Because a lot of detectives play on the right. They see so much of the bad parts of us that they don't trust anything. They're so committed to the jobs and alcohol. They have broken relationships, whatever. This guy, right, when we meet Harry in this movie, right, is played by Scott Bakula. He actually is coming off a case, right, where he sees a child who is most likely truly possessed. We get the sense that he at least fully believed it, and it went absolutely tits up.
Yeah. I mean, that's really kind of like, that's what the nice thing is about, I'd say, this version of, it's the truest occult detective, so to speak. Like, to me, Constantine is a great character, but Constantine is first and foremost not a detective. To me, Constantine is definitely more a sorcerer type.
Right.
Like, he has the ability to wield this magic.
Right.
Occult detective, particularly in Harry D'Amour's case. By the way, great spelling of that name. D''Amour.
Amour. I like that.
I know. You do love that. In Harry's case, though, he is protected, but he is not a practitioner. And I think that's a very important distinction, particularly for any sort of film noir. I think when someone like a detective in this case is a practitioner of the very thing he's detecting, I think that kind of muddies the water a little bit. The idea is that you want to have a character like this who can still be shocked. Like, that's why I think Constantine is kind of more just a sorcerer to me, because Constantine is not shocked when he sees the devil or when he sees these things.
Right.
Like,
but
Harry's
unlike him,
experiences
but this is
are
what I mean. Harry,
shocking still.
When you're just around, like, you get the sense that this is like Harry's like first case after his life is ruined, right? He's like, well, I was a guy who like was a detective, right? I was doing normal shit. And then I saw like we see that horrific flashback of the devil child and the devil mother, or maybe just the demon who's claimed the child. And you get the sense that this man is just broken, right? Like, oh, so now we're starting the rest of my journey. Like before I was detecting. And it's kind of like I heard someone refer to once. There was like a screenplay for Dungeons and Dragons going around town, and people were giving notes. And someone's like, "Yeah, the wizard will essentially be like a hacker." In those, because people just were like, I guess Dungeons and Dragons isn't archetypal enough. You have to give it another archetype. But sometimes people like all of magic always seems to be a detective work a little bit, right? Where you got to like suss through and find your answers. Harry, in his own way, never dabbles in the magic. But somehow we get the sense that he is drawn into all of this, right? Because several characters even mention the importance of him arriving. Swan seems to kind of gravitate to it. And there's this. So that's kind of one of the fun things that they leave pretty open by the end of it, is why Harry is so integral to this. Was the demon that was attacking him in New York City like, oh, I got to get this dude out to L.A. for his screen test. You know what I mean? Like, he's got the chops. He's got that Harrison Ford body with that made-for-TV face.
I mean, this is, like, the great thing about, like, this is Clive Barker, too. Again, I did, like, my own research. Like, Harry D'Amour's a character who's actually transcended, like, through Clive Barker's stories. Mm-hmm. He actually had his own... He was a big part of the Hellraiser comic that came out from Boom Studios. So, like... Again, it's like him, Pinhead. Like, these are characters that Clive Barker's created that transcend, that endure, simply because they do fit an archetype within the Clive Barker universe of needs. And I think that that's what's fun about this. And I'm not saying that's what makes Lord of Illusions interesting at all. Lord of Illusions is interesting.
No, every single frame and line of dialogue does that. I understand.
Right. But Harry D'Amour does a great job of being a detective with a detective that has a different spin. Like, it's not necessarily the detective we're used to, but it's a solid start, I would say.
Yeah, and I really like Scott Bakula in this a lot. He has a good demeanor throughout, right? And what I like about him is for a man who's broken, you still get this, he's so willing for the fight, right? Which is, it's one of those things you see in movie characters that I think we undervalue a lot, because so many of us, I think, like, when the thing happens, right? We're just like, well, that's it. Like, you know, it ruins me. And this man sees it, and now he's willing to take the fight, because I think you could argue that Harry's a fairly non-heroic character, right? But just willingness to take on the fight constantly, especially knowing, right? Once he sees that possessed child, and then once he starts going deeper and deeper in these circles, not everyone is a fake, you know, magician from Brooklyn. Some of these people have real juice. And even in the face of that, he almost doubles his resolve to, you know, keep fighting.
Well, I think that's I think Scott Bakula is a wonderful actor, by the way. Like, this is a man who, like, got quantum leaped, and then, like, for some reason, people stopped hiring for, like, this kind of stuff. Ridiculous. I think he's awesome. I love Scott
Quantum leaps off the screen, am I right?
Absolutely. 100%. Like, again, I think he's just a great actor, and you're right. He does embody this great, like, up for it attitude.
Right.
Like, and it's not a go-getter thing. Like, he does exactly what, and it's interesting you brought him up. Like, to me, this is, like, it felt so much like Marlowe. It felt like a Philip Marlowe thing. Like, that is the vibe I got the entire movie. It was like, this is like Philip Marlowe if he had gone one step too far and never came back. Like, that's what it is, which is great.
Yeah, no, and because this is the thing, like, I think that base for him, and Bakula does this really well, because he seems to really, the scenes where he's kind of just having his jokes, right, like his devil-may-care quips, feels more in his wheelhouse. But he does a really good job of laying this base. Because one of the first times we see him in action, right, he's tailing a guy who's there for insurance fraud, right, who's just having this great hooker party. And then he's like, oh, yeah, wait, I need to stop hooking to go get my palms read? Like, that's what the movie wants us to believe. And you're like, all right, that's your one. You get one per movie. I'll go with you on this journey, right?
Yeah. This guy wearing a pinky ring is just tired of hooking for a hot minute.
Yeah, he's just like, you know, like, the ladies are just pouring things on me, and we're running around naked on the catwalk, so everyone knows that I'm getting pussy, right? Like, that guy is all of a sudden going to stop at the pussy
leaving the windows wide open to the Commodore Motel, yes.
Yeah.
That guy plows.
Yeah, that guy's known for being punctual and keeping appointments, I'm sure, right? So that guy goes in, he runs past Scott Bakula, right? And Bakula runs in. And he sees this room that's filled with blood, and then all of a sudden, you know, like a neo-Nazi circus geek jumps out and is fighting him. And what we learn immediately is that Harry is so quick to lethal force. Like, there's probably 3 or 4 times in this movie where he's just like, I will just kill whatever's in front of me.
Yeah. As far as his detective skills go, most of it lies in snoops rather than, like, questioning people. He mostly murders people.
Well, because it's weird, right? Because the geek, like,
murders.
breaks through. He's having, like, this, you know, he's learning about the Puritan or whatever. And the geek breaks in and he's like, I got it. I'm going to fucking punch his ass through the window and definitely kill him, right? In a town he's never been in. And I don't know the process for being detective licensed, but this movie seems to say, don't look behind that curtain, right? In the Emerald City. There's just a couple times like that. He definitely kills a guy with a Mind Freak prop beneath the stage, right? So there's at least like 2 attempted murders right there. Later, when he's being chased by fire, he's like, I better just put some loose rounds through this house, right? Because maybe I'll kill the fire serpent with... Like, he's just really fucking into murders.
Yeah, he's eager to get some shit going on, you know? Like, that's like, he's eager to cap people.
Yeah,
Respect.
And so there's something extra dark about him, but I think that's why you got to lay that nice base.
The real problem here is that we didn't get the classic detective movie scene, though, where he gets brought in by the cops and goes, you got to shoot first, ask questions later mentality, Demure. And he's like, fuck you.
That's why you got bounced off the force, Demure. You know what I mean?
I get results. Like, that's...
Yeah.
Like,
if only you were more by the book. You would have been on DeForce, Demure. You know, oh, you could have done like just some tough talking Sarge.
The fact that we did not, because I thought it's interesting you bring this up, because after that scene, I thought the same thing. I was like, wait a second, they're just going to ask him questions, like none of the questions they ask him are, why'd you throw that guy out the fucking window? It's, oh yeah, I don't know what's going on. And then they're like, oh, where'd he go? I'm like, well, excuse me, this guy murdered someone.
Yeah, so this must be like a Clive Barker thinks this is how straight women think, which is essentially the detective's always like writing down like claims to have murdered a guy he never knew by punching him out the window. Found in a body with a guy who's a human pincushion. Claims there was another like weird-eyed boy toy. None of those people are found except for him and the dead body. And then she just writes it down. She's like, "You rascal! How long are you staying? What's your Airbnb Yeah, like that lady detective talks to him like 3 times and consistently just keeps being like, oh, Mondays, right? She literally just lets him up. And then in the police station, they have him in for questioning, like, hey, this celebrity just got murdered, we think.
Right.
You were beneath the stage firing where gunshots were heard, and you mind freaked this guy, right? And impaled his ass with the sand launcher.
Right.
It's cool, though. You have one cut on your face. Go ahead. Oh, also, feel free to break into someone's office and sit behind their desk and maybe, alter your fucking stories with the widow. I was like, what is happening?
I really enjoyed Clive Barker's ability to ignore general procedures and just say, listen, this is not important. We got to get to this Lord of Illusions stuff.
What happened in this movie is that Scott Bakula was allowed to run so amok that's why they were cracking down on Riggs's ass so much in Lethal Weapon. They're like, we had a loose cannon like you here before. He was an illusion detective. We're not doing that again.
The cops are so, like, blasé. The best part is the cops are so like, well, he gets results. But then he shows up at the Magic Castle, and they're like, hey, you stay the fuck out of here. Wait a second. The Magic Castle is where the buck stops. Like, that's where we're like, whoa, no. You do not get in here.
Yeah, this gallivanting attitude of yours might fly with the LAPD, but not here, pal. We have rules about illusioning. Yeah, I think Harry's really fun in this movie. I really do.
It's great.
Love Scott Bakula. He's got so many great scenes, right? When he rips the face apart and the body. Also, when he's just like, it seems like he has a small hunch that something's afoot, but he's like, because he's yelling at her like, tell me the truth, damn it, to Famke Janssen. And then he's like, but before you tell me the truth, and he's just like, yeah, I'll bang you. Impossibly. Because it felt like the way they shot it, that they were fucking in the room with the casket of her dead illusionist husband.
Yeah, I thought that too. And I was like, man, Clive Barker
fucking
is
power move,
up.
dude.
But I was also kind of like, you know what? This is pretty much Clive Barker. This is pretty much, why not?
Yeah.
Why not? We get it.
Well, a guy who gets a guy who's just like, yeah, I can just run around and throw people out of windows, dude. Like, I'm not going to stop and be like, oh, can we pull a blankie over the dead guy while I pound his wife? No way. That's not how I demure it. You know what I mean? There's no way.
Nice.
Yeah.
This is my first time watching this movie, and the delight I felt when Famke Janssen showed up on camera, can only be described as returning to my 10-year-old roots. The first time I saw her as Xenia Onatopp in GoldenEye, and be like,
it like broke my brain. It was the right age where that movie came out, and I was just kind of discovering James Bond. Mm-hmm. And it's very much like Doctor Who, right? When you get in, that's the guy you latch on. Like, I've always been a Pierce Brosnan guy. Even though at least half of his movies are pretty hard to defend as good, right?
Garbage.
But I think he's just like the perfect embodiment of Bond to me. When I think of Bond, it's always Pierce first. And yeah, when I saw Xenia Onatopp, and honestly, it's just gotten better with age. You're like, man, of all the movie deaths I've seen, like, I want that old fucking, like, ginger admiral or whatever the fuck. Like, yeah, you can do that to me. Like, let's go out fucking leg wrestling. That's great, right? But
that is
it's so funny to see her in this, right? Because
It's weird because it's so different. And again, like, because she's young, like, I've seen her in other stuff. Like, she was in Nip Tuck. She's done a lot of TV since then.
Yeah.
But, like, I'm just brought right back to 10-year-old me watching Goldeneye.
Yeah.
I'm like, why is she so cool? Like, why isn't she just like legs? Why is she just leg squeezing dudes to death? What's going on?
Yeah, there are just actors and actresses that will forever be bound to people's memory, right? I mean, I have a couple. It's like Famke Janssen. I remember when Barbed Wire came out. I remember the first time I saw Jessica Rabbit. You know, there are like 5 of them for all, like, you know, where you're just like, oh, like you have like an emotional like moment. You know, I'm sure like my wife always says the first time she saw Fight Club, right, with Brad Pitt, she was just like, what is that thing?
Everyone's got a thing. I get it.
And as Lord of Illusions tells us, it rarely works out because her fantasy was Brad Pitt and she's married to me. Like, you could make an argument that I am the exact inverse of Brad Pitt. Like if there was a pulling inside out effect, that would be me. But you know what's really cool about this too? We haven't quite gotten to there are some other great parts, but my favorite thing in this movie is I absolutely love the cult. I fucking adore the cult.
Oh, yeah.
And I love
cult,
the way they handle the magic in this movie. I think it's really fascinating, honestly. And that opening scene, it just kind of sets this awesome stage. You're like, wow, this movie's going to be fucking out there, and I love it. Mm-hmm. I actually took a picture because you know I love when movies start with opening dialogue or like, you know, cards to explain what's happening. And this one's great. Listen
I actually
to this.
thought that
there are 2 worlds of magic. One is the glittering domain of the illusionist. That sounds like a passive-aggressive Yelp review. The other is a secret place where magic is terrifying reality. Here men have the power of demons, and death itself is an illusion. That is awesome. Like, I just saw that card, and you're like, yes, I'm into it. Cut to cars driving down. There's a guy whose fucking nuts are somehow being bound in the world's tiniest jean shorts. He has, you know, one blue eye. He runs inside. We just got Nyx juggling like a little fire, surrounded by the extra for every serial killer you've ever heard of. Then we cut to a room where he just has a little girl hostage and a baboon that he lets out the chain, and we just never hear from that fucking baboon again. That feels like it should be an integral part of this whole cult hierarchy. That's gone. And then it just devolves into fucking insanity. And you're immediately like, yes, bitch. Yes, this is why I love Clive Barker.
I could tell you, actually, even before characters were shown on screen, as soon as I saw the cards, I'm like, this is why this is Griffey's like favorite detective movie.
Oh, yeah, baby.
I'm like, all it has to do is this. And we literally could not watch anything else. And as long as it had that, he'd be like, God, I need more. Give me more.
I love it. But it is the thing that I so wish they would bring back in movies. It's just the 1 to 2 card like text to set me up. Stop doing the fucking flashbacks all the time. Tell me. Just fucking tell me, dude.
The thing that was really, really, really great, and the thing that really sets the tone for the movie is not even the cult scenes, which are great too. It's that tracking shot over the desert of all that shit. That alone, to me, is like the real magic of the movie itself. Is that
that's what you like?
You needed to. I know it sounds weird, but like if you needed to know anything about this movie and about how this was going to go and like what you were going to discover, all you needed to see was really the first 2 minutes of like that tracking shot through the desert of that shit. Because to me, that explains so much of like the dirt, like, this is going to be a dirty thing, like dirty movie. Like there's going to be a lot of like, it's going to be grimy. It's not going to be this glistening, like it's not Hellraiser. It's not dudes and whips and chains and shit like that. It's literally the main bad guy is a guy who's wearing a bippy top the entire time. Like that is,
I like
that's
how
pretty amazing.
You just kind of casually, you're like, it's not some austere, you know, on its pedestal virginal white movie like Hellraiser. This one's real. That's probably that's the weirdest passive, you know, Hellraiser's not hardcore enough I've ever heard in my life.
I wasn't even saying Hellraiser's not hardcore enough. I'm just saying Hellraiser.
You raise an interesting point.
Hellraiser's sleek.
It is. It's very sleek, right? And it's more while they're both, I'll make this argument later that they're kind of, again, that Hellraiser is to Lord of Illusions what I am to Brad Pitt, right? Inverses. Exact inside outs, right? But what I think is really cool is you get this amazing character actor, right? Daniel Von Bargen, who we've seen in a million movies, right? And he always kind of plays the, like, corporate asshole, detective asshole, doesn't get it guy, right? Like, the guy is just there to be like, oh, yeah, there's cool things in this world that make life worth living. Yeah, right, I'm going to go home and drink 240s by myself and eat a Hungry Man. You think I regret that I don't believe in dragons? I don't even know if that was a role he did, but you would be shocked if that wasn't it, right? But he comes up, and what I like about this, too, is that he's not a glamorous cult leader, right? He's this disgusting fucking disheveled. And what it shows you is there is this cost to what he's dabbling in, right? And I think Clive Barker, more than one of my favorite things about the way he tells stories is I would say that he, among anyone that I really enjoy, right? He never has any kind of glamorization of this stuff, right? Like Clive Barker, the thing that I always kind of take from it is, and this movie says it a couple times, right? That the flesh is a trap. And what I think he means is, in a lot of his imagery, right, this kind of psychosexual, like, melding and pulling of the flesh and bodily distortions and, you know, all that, is that eventually that's the trap, right? You can chase and chase and chase, whether it's, you know, sex or drugs or whatever. The flesh only has so much, right? And this one is this is the movie where I feel like Clive Barker is kind of making his, like, his philosophy a little more crystallized, right? Whereas Hellraiser is, I so want to see how far the flesh can go that I go to a trap that is this puzzle box. And then Pinhead essentially says, right, like, I can play with your body for an infinite amount of time, right? Pleasure, pain, all that. This is the movie that says, man, that shit will never, ever be enough, right? It's exactly calling out Pinhead's entire jam. And just say, you know, that pursuit of something more runs throughout all the characters. And I think it's really cool that Clive Barker makes this movie, right? Where he's like, all right, enough of the flesh stuff. I do the flesh and everything. I'll do it here for you because I know why you bought the ticket. But that extra layer in this one, right, is that, you know, magic is what is worth living for. I think becomes a really cool kind of thesis for his career.
Interesting. That's a good point, I guess. I like that. Yeah, I mean, I do like that is what it's not his it's not his usual thing. It actually reminded me of a lot of, like, 80s noir stuff where it's, like, obviously, like, Body Heat, like shit like that.
Ooh.
Like, there's a sense of there's a different vibe to it all. Like, that I think is probably the best part is he's not just doing a version of Hellraiser. Like, you're right. He's expanding his oeuvre a little bit and saying, I can do that too, but, like, I can also tell this pretty decent story about detective work and magic and the real magic of the world. Yeah.
But that's what I mean. It's a story about a detective, an illusionist, right? All these people essentially they've kind of hit the end of their road. And they're all confronting this fucking bigger question. You know, what is the fucking purpose of all of this? Like, even Swan, would argue, is one of the weirdest and maybe worst planning characters of all time in any movie, right? Like, he essentially is like, hey, let's go to the ranch. He stole a girl. We're going to get her back. And they're like, what's the plan? Just separate and go room to room with guns and pray that Baboon is not on the fucking frenzy, right? Because that would definitely kill all of them. And he just walks in and he has no plan to deal with the immense power of, you know, Nyx. Come to find out there's a lot more going on there, right? But, you know, as we move on, there's this broken part of even him, right? By the time we see Swan again, right? After Nyx has his fucking fingers in, like, you'll never see the world the same. You know, those great cool Clive Barker scenes, right? Just like, of course, I'll slide my fingers into your flesh. And it's just perfect, you know, what he does. Yeah. But the rest of the movie, we never see Swan okay. You know, and it's weird because by the time we see him, he's married to Famke Janssen. he has a maid running around. He's in his giant study with all of his fucking like carnival gear or whatever. And he's just reading a paper, but you can see him fucking shaking, right? He knows, oh, fuck, like they're killing the people to get to Nyx.
Right.
You can tell he's broken, right? Even his new illusion, he's trying to plan his death and this and that. But then, so this is the whole movie. He tries to plan his death, but even in death, he still keeps tab on his wife, fucking Demure, right? And is mad about it. Jealous to the point where when we see the Origami fire demon, it looks exactly like a spell that Swan casts later in the movie. So we are told that it's Nyx and it's the bad guy haunting them, but he hasn't been revived yet. He hasn't shown that power. I think that was her husband like, you fucking dicked my wife. Granted, he should have done the spell like 30 minutes earlier, right, when they were just starting the sex. But but that's really, I mean, this guy is faking his own death but still cares who's fucking his wife. Right. You know what I mean?
Well,
this guy who fakes his own death and then fucking goes to his own funeral. Right there's this very fucking broken nature because everything we see is his art and his show, right? He's like, I'm the Chris Angel now. I've mind freaked the world. I have it all. But all we ever see is a guy who is wildly unhappy and scared, right? And it's really nailed in. There are two scenes at the end that are fascinating to me, which is when they find the grave, right? Like one, like, hey, maybe don't use a grave in the middle of the desert with the only landmark in that whole desert. Neither here nor there. Maybe he secretly wanted Nyx back, as we learned.
Could be, yes.
Is he struggling to get Valentin out of the hole, right? Demure, he's like, come on, help me. And we see Swan, and he's, get out of the car, get out of the car. This is a guy we saw physically pick up a car with his mind, right? His magic. Right, yeah. And he's fucking scared of, like, facing all of this, right? And then there's another... that's what I mean, right? There's just this constant, like, unease and fear about him where he's a man who's seen beyond, right? When Nyx entered his mind, he has seen the fucking beyond and he's fucking terrified, man. He's a broken spirit for every scene in the movie.
Well, and I think that's another thing Clive Barker does so well when he writes these things is I love that Clive Barker's stories are all about consequences. Like, whether he intends them to be or not, I feel like everything he's ever done is about the consequences of true magic. The consequences of the true pursuit of, like, the pursuit of truth in a way, when you think about it. Because really, Nyx is displaying the truth of power, you know? Like, he can do these amazing things, and at least at the beginning of the movie, obviously. Yeah, and, at the end, too. But, Swan inheriting that stuff, the reason he's scared isn't because he's worried that they're going to come after him, I don't think. To me, he's fearful of the consequences. Like the ancillary issue of people coming after him, I think that's probably less important to him than the consequences of simply having the knowledge. Like, that is the scariest part of all.
He's scared that he wants Nyx to come back. I think that's why he buries him at the rock.
I mean, that's definitely part of it.
Because we hear later, there's this great line that Nyx has, right? And it's fascinating. Because he comes back and he's like this metal-ass zombie, right? Like, hey, shave your heads, be punished for me. Oh, hey, boy toy with the one eye, psh, bitch smack, right? He's just fucking his followers up. He has no care for them at all, right? His colors are revealed. But he does really care about Swan, right? And he has this great kind of soliloquy he goes on at a point where he's, I was born to destroy the world, right? And Swan was the one I forget how he phrased it, right? Essentially what he says is, after he destroys the world, he's like, we were going to share each other's company in the dark. And that to me is one of the, it seems dark, but that's a really good sentiment of how I think people want love to be, right? When people, in this thing, we've been married for a long time, right? And been with our wives for a long time. It's really easy to get far away from, do you remember that moment, right? The fucking moment you knew. And your body was ablaze, right? Filled with that magical spark, right? And I think that kind of captures this sentiment is he's really in love with Swan, right? Take that as you will. Sure. That was his guy, right? And he has this other servant who's so desperately been trying to resurrect. That's one of my other favorite things. He's like, it took me a long time to learn the resurrection spell. I made my own tools to help resurrect Nyx, and then all he does is take 2 screws out. I'm like, you could have just watched This Old House and done that shit like 13 years ago. Just get a claw hammer, pop that shit out. Again, he has all these devoted followers, right? The not the coolest club. Like, no one in a cult is someone you want to hang out with, but they're there.
No.
They're shaving their fucking heads with glass. That whole ending has a lot of questions where I'm like, what have those people been doing for Where's Double Snake Guy? What's he been doing for the last 13 years, right? Was he just working at a Subway?
The cult scene, particularly the quicksand stuff, has one of my all-time favorite moments in a movie. And look, this was a really fun movie to watch. I woke my kid up because I was laughing so hard at this scene.
Yeah.
So it starts raining, and Nick's basically essentially tricks all of his followers and starts quicksanding them, sucking them into the floor so that they meet their doom. There's one guy who's not going down.
Yeah. I love that.
Like
guy.
He's like, this guy's like, he reached out for someone, tried to pull someone up. His like final stand, just fuck you, like giving him the finger. Like, I'm like, what other movie have you ever seen someone who's getting like dicked over by their boss, like in one of these kinds of like genre films, and their initial instinct is to just give him the finger, fuck you, man, like that. Just something about
it's the Harry Potter scene we all wanted with Snape to do that to Voldemort, right? Like, fuck you, Lord Voldemort. I love Harry. I love that boy. Right? We all wanted that scene. We never got. But no, what it is this is the guy, right?
I was laughing so hard.
This is the guy who's been in this cult, right? He came back 13 years. He's like, I don't know, this doesn't feel right.
13 years later.
I don't have a snake. I don't have the thing, right? I'm a background guy. And then all of a sudden, the boss is like turned on him, and he has this like brief moment, right? His whole life is flashed before his eyes. And he's like, oh my God, this whole cult is bullshit. We're not a family. We're not Traveler. And he's like, I'll save you. And then he's like, no, fuck you. I realized the ruse. It's just wildly too late. But I like that guy fighting back, man. Right? He totally discovers his fierce individualism at the absolute last possible moment.
He's like the embodiment of every cult leader. Every cult member ever.
Yeah. But this is one of the things I love about that end, though, right? He's just throwing life away casually. This is a man who's come back from the fucking grave. And he has this line I love. His like ending here is just amazing. And it's so fun, too, because, again, this actor has been a character actor in so many of the same role. To see him really get a fucking push it, right? And be this, like, evil fucking magic necromancer, whatever the fuck he is, it's fucking awesome. And he really eats it up. But there's this awesome moment where I believe the line is, he said, I was a man who was supposed to become a god and didn't want it, I believe is how he phrased it, right? Because all he wanted was to come back and fucking get his love back, right? Come back to Swan. Right. And he, at the end of the movie, this guy, everything falling apart, he's beating the grave, whatever. All he wants to do is fucking scream at Famke Janssen for taking his dude. You know what I mean? There's something, because what it is, it's belying the fact that maybe love is the real most powerful magic, right? But I love that whole ending. It's really fat. Again, here's another. We'll just keep cutting away to like the weirdest things they do in the ending. I love when Scott Bakula looks at him. It reminded me of the Other Guys, which is a on the nose satire, right? When Scott Bakula looks at Swan, he's like, "Hey, you think you could lift me like you lift the car?" And Swan's like, "Oh yeah," and he lifts Scott Bakula, slowly drifts him towards the evil wizard, essentially so Scott Bakula could push him. I was like, Scott, get up and do a fucking running jump kick. Like, what the fuck was that? I mean, he grabbed at his face. Maybe he had to, like, pluck the horns out. This is that great moment where they have those unbelievable practical effects of, like, the fucking evil growing out of him, which is great. But I was like, I think that's the most useless, unless Scott Bakula's like, I don't know, dude, Swan might survive. I got to get him to use up even more of his life energy so I can keep dicking down his wife. But I was like, that is the worst. That plan did not help at all. Like, you could have just run up and pushed him, and then he Sam Raimi's his way down to hell. Brilliant.
That was great.
Fucking brilliant.
That, I think, actually is exactly what Scott Bakula was doing. He was definitely trying to drain Swan of all the energy so he could get back to demooring his wife.
Don't worry, I'll save the
That's
day.
definitely-
It just slices his throat. Oh, what happened? Whoa, what a dick that wizard is. Hi-ya! You know what I mean? But in the end, though, this is another funny thing, is that you could argue that Nyx gets exactly what he wants. Because they're fleeing the house,
they're
Swan
together.
is ripped apart, right? Pulled from his flesh into the hellhole, which is now closed, right? That maybe in the end they are going to keep each other company in the darkness, right?
Yeah, I can see that.
Kind of lovely. I don't know that either of them need to be rewarded per se.
Yeah, I'm not sure that their eternal damnation together is necessarily supposed to be a reward, but that's one way of looking at it. Sure.
It's like a Three's Company thing. Oh, now that we got rid of that John Ritter, let's get to it. You know what I mean? Three's Company too. Yeah, this is what I think the movie does, though, right? Is it's this really fascinating take on the lines between, kind of illusion and magic, right? But what I think they do even better than that is they layer it with this other narrative, which is people having to draw that line in themselves, right?
Right.
The moment where we have to stop lying to our fucking selves, right? Stop doing illusions on our own fucking mind. You know what I mean?
Right.
And that's what Harry's going through, right? Like, what did he see? And will he ever be able... You get the sense that Harry's mad that there are people out there that have this power and he doesn't, right? That he'll never be in control and that... Like, he seems really jealous. Not that Swan is rich or has the wife or whatever, but that he has all this fucking power.
I think that's the chip on... That's the chip on your shoulder as a detective. You can't
but they
give
all
a
have
detective
that, right?
everything he wants.
Because Famke Janssen has the same thing where it's like, I am completely indebted to Swan. I love him because he's the man who freed me. But also, I hopped into bed super easy with Harry. Right? And she's kind of doing that. Like, how much does she owe him? Right? She clearly doesn't really love him. Like, she loves him in a way and appreciates what he did. But, like, there's something else going on. Same with Nyx. Same with the boy toy, right? He's kind of fanatically trying to revive Nyx, and then the first thing he gets is a fucking backhand. And then he's like, well, maybe I can still prove myself, right? Like, they're all grappling with this. The mission feels fucking false and or useless, right? Like Swan, like, oh, I'll just kill myself, only to want to know what that does to people. And maybe he wants Nyx to come back himself. So I think that's what the movie does is, on the very surface, right? It's just a really fun people abusing magic murder mystery, right?
Yeah.
But it really layers nicely with characters that are actually going through shit, right? And there are some things that have not aged super well, right? The lawnmower man ghost fires past or what have you.
Whatever.
But for the most part, it's just a really brilliantly acted, really fun, journey that is built on real characters, which you rarely see in this kind of movie.
Oh, no, totally. I think that's the observation of everyone everyone kind of loses. And again, this is like what makes it a great detective story to me. And I really like the genre. Like, I think film noir is definitely one of my favorite genres. Yeah. But the thing that makes this a great detective story is that we meet a guy after something that really haunts his career. And that's really kind of like when we meet a lot of these guys in their stories. So we're meeting someone after something that immediately has happened that's really changed the direction of his career. And what's fun is watching this character who's now kind of has to embrace it all, for one. But more to the point, it leaves him unresolved. Like, there's more to the story. Like, I think that's what's great about Clive Barker's horror genre in and of itself. Like, his take is that it's never ending to me. And that's something I really enjoy about Clive Barker. So to me, the character of Harry D'Amour is the perfect detective because he'll always be on the case. There's always something going on in this world that Clive Barker's created for him.
Yeah, and it's got so much of that, right? Like, they all are so struggling with, this blurred line of reality, but it's in a very personal way. And that's
Right.
what I appreciate about it, man. And that's the question,
Totally.
right? What magic really brought Nyx back besides the love of that one follower, his love for Swan? What brings Swan there? There's a lot of this, because that's what I mean. You can look at it in the big surface, like kind of weird S&M-y Clive Barker way, but there's a lot going on inside of these characters. Like even someone like Valentin, right, is a pretty conflicted, kind of classic bad, not quite a butler, manservant. You're like, why would you? The fact that Swan confides in Valentin where the body is, that lets you know he knows if there's a weak link in your chain, right? You start looking around, you're like, well, my wife who already stood up to Nyx, all right. These other people, these other magicians, we already fought our way in once. Face down a baboon and, whatever. Then you look around and you're like, Valentin, there's the crack. That's the Achilles Valentin right there. That's him. I know he'll break.
Right.
So, but even Valentin has like a pretty good death where he's like, I was but a manservant, and at the end I was abused. Also, sorry, you guys are going to die again. And he goes... I don't know. But that's what I mean. All the characters seemingly have this extra push, man, that I find really fascinating.
I mean, it's a fascinating movie, and there's a lot of layers to it, which is great. And again, it's using the framework of the detective story in a very interesting way, which is always something I appreciate. Anytime movies find a way to, I wouldn't say subvert the genre, that would be the wrong word, but I'd say celebrate while bringing the idea of the detective story into another genre is always something I really enjoy.
Yeah. And this is a lot of movies like this that I've seen. They cheat on the building the groundwork of the characters, and they're like, as long as it's just got the fun stuff, it'll be fine. And I think Lord of Illusions could have fallen into that. And, I think there's an argument to be made that this movie could have been way better if a more experienced director had been at the helm, perhaps. Because there are a couple moments where you're like, that's a weird thing to cut away to. Okay, like, we just cut to, like, a real close-up of a sprinkler for, like, 5 seconds. You're like, I get it, we're in a graveyard. Maybe the least interesting thing you could show me right now. All right, I got to get back in the story. But, to me, it's a really good storyteller doing his best across a lot of different crafts, man. And, I think this is a wildly good movie. I'm glad that it's now in your top 10 favorite movies of all time. You're welcome. That's it, guys, for Lord of Illusions. I blindsided Alex with trickery, and now he's got a new favorite movie. I hope you guys liked Lord of Illusion as much as we did.
What is happening?
The pod is still on the case all month, so we're back with more people solving mysteries. The only movie possibly better than Lord of Illusion, I also picked Golden Child with Eddie Murphy. I will be making the case to you that it's the best Eddie Murphy as a detective movie, and I don't think it's close. So stay tuned for that. We got more good stuff coming for you. Hopefully we'll get something that's in the theater now and burning up the box office. We got a lot of good stuff, guys. Please leave us a rating and review. Please hit us up on all our socials. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel, The Nerd Alchemist. That's plural, with an S at the end. And we'll be back soon, cracking more cases. Sounded pretty tough.
That's right.